Okay, so we've reached strike temperature and we're going to be adding the malt into the mash tun now. As I said, we're going for a porter today. We've got about 16 pounds of organic two-row. We've got about 3 pounds of brown malt, 2 pounds of Crystal 60, and a pound of chocolate. It's already ground here in the bag, so we'll just add it into the mash tun. I'm going to put it all into the mash tun, and then I'll stir it around to make sure that we get all the air bubbles out of the mash. I've also turned the pump off while I'm doing this to help minimize any of the grain getting sucked down below the mash screen. Gonna let the grain settle out a bit, and then we'll start the pump on so that it has time to form a good grain bed. Okay, so we've added the malt. I'm just going to stir it around now just to make sure that we get any break up any dough balls or any air bubbles that are in there in the grain. If you don't break up the air bubbles, then you're not going to get as good conversion, because the air is preventing the water and the enzymes from snipping away at the carbohydrates in the grain. So that's all stirred up. Now I'm going to close the top port for the recirculation. Just going to make sure that the hose is fine. There we are. I'm going to close the top port, make sure the bottom port is open into the pump, and I'm going to turn the pump on. Then I'm going to adjust the flow of the top port. I'm going to throttle it until I get the flow that I want to be constantly circulating. I don't want it to take it in too fast, or it's going to be sucking the water through the mash screen too much, and you may get a stuck sparge. It's just going to be sucking the grain down so hard that it doesn't allow the water to get through there. So you want it, you want to control that flow rate. I'll just plug the, and just open it a little bit. We'll look inside the mash tun in a little bit, and you'll see as it starts to clarify, you'll see that the wort is clearing up, and the circulation of the wort in there, which gives you the best mash efficiency, because it's distributing the water over the entire grain bed. It's going down through the grain, and your enzymes are getting the most access to the carbohydrates. Okay, so the mash is underway. I'm going to hit my timer. The temperature that I've programmed the controller at is at 67 Celsius or 153 Fahrenheit. That's the temperature that we're going to want the mash to be at. So it's already programmed. If ever the temperature in the mash drops below that, the controller is going to be putting power into the element, which is going to start heating the wort up as it's going through the grain bed. It's going to be heated before it goes up through here, and it's going to be put back into the top at the exact temperature that you want it to be. So this is the flow rate approximate flow rate that I like to use in the mash tun. Like I said, it's a few liters per minute, and it ensures that you have a good distribution of water throughout the grain bed, constantly moving past those sugars, picking up the sugars, and allowing the enzymes to interact with the complex carbohydrates, cutting them up to a size that the yeast can digest. Okay, and the mash is underway now. We've stirred up the grain, made sure that it's all light and there's no compaction and the air bubbles are all out. We've adjusted the flow through the pump. It's constantly circulating now, and we've adjusted the flow rate so that we know we're not going to get the grain bed compacting. The sparge water temperature is now up to temp, so we just shut that off. If you buy a second Ranco, you can control that automatically as well. The beauty of the Rancos and 120 volt system here is that you don't need to worry about temperatures getting away on you. You've got a babysitter that is sitting by the vessels at all times, regulating it, so it's pretty much worry-free for you. What I like to do with the temperature for the sparge water, as I've mentioned in one of my other videos, is I personally don't like to run 75 degrees Celsius through the grain bed, for the very reason that you don't want to be pulling out tannins out of the grain. And the higher the temperature is, the more risk you have of getting some of those undesirable compounds that are in the grain and flushing them out. The beauty, on the other hand, you do want to stop your enzymes from digesting the sugars so that you can maintain your wort profile. But the beauty of the heating element underneath the mash screen is that you're able to heat up the wort as you're transferring it over to your boil kettle, and it just heats up underneath the mash screen the wort as it's leaving. So you can wash, you can rinse out your grain, you can sparge your grain from the hot liquor kettle with your water at 67 or 152 degrees Fahrenheit, and you don't need to worry about the grain, about tannins and whatnot coming out of the grain. At the same time, you're able to shut off the enzymatic processes in the wort. So we're basically good to go. We've got an hour now. We're going to check back a little bit, just make sure everything's going well. I can tell just by the tone of the pump whether it's going to be moving the right amount of liquid through it. You can hear it. If it's moving faster or if it's struggling to pull stuff because you got a stuck sparge, the pitch of the pump is going to change. So you don't even need to look. You can even just hear when everything's working well. So we'll see you back maybe in about 30 minutes. We're just going to check and make sure that things are going well, and then we'll be back at the end of the mash. So here we are 30 minutes in the mash. You can see how the flow from the pump is circulating the water in the top of the grain bed. This is causing the really good exposure of the enzymes to the sugars, constant agitation of the grain bed, which is going to give you the best efficiency possible. If I just raise the hose out a little bit, you can see that it still has good flow through it. So after 30 minutes, we're in good shape. Nothing is stuck, the mash isn't stuck, and we're looking good. An hour, we've got about 10 more minutes left in our mash. We can see that the flow is still good, it's still circulating the liquid on top of the grain bed, and we've got a flow rate of about 4 liters per minute, which means that we cycle through the grain bed about 5-6 times throughout the period of the mash, which is a good rate. One of our objectives at Brewha is to simplify the brewing process, as we've mentioned. One of the ways that we do that is to minimize as much equipment as possible. You'll notice that we're only using one pump. A lot of setups will encourage you to use 2 pumps. We found that it isn't all that necessary. What we do is to use the pump for the mash, and once we're done here, we're going to transfer the inlet. We're going to shut the pump off, transfer it over to the hot liquor kettle, which is going to then provide the sparge water, and we're going to passively run the wort down into the boil kettle. Once all of the sparge water is in the mash tun, then if you have a jacketed boil kettle, the regular pot that we're also selling, and it's sitting beside, you're not going to be able to passively run all the wort down into it because it's right beside it. But as long as the water level in the mash tun is above the water level in the boil kettle, you're going to be able to keep pushing it over to the boil kettle. Only when you've ran out of sparge water and the water level starts dropping down and the boil kettle level is sort of reaching the same height as it is in the mash tun, then you're going to need to move the pump back into moving from the mash tun over into the boil kettle. So I'm going to shut the pump off. We've turned the pump off. We're going to transfer the hoses from the inlet in the mash where it's recirculating through the mash tun, and I'm going to move it over to the hot liquor kettle because we're going to start sparging here real soon. So I close this valve, close this valve. This valve just creates a bit of a suction so that when I take this off of here, that it's not going to lose too much, not too much is going to fall out. So I just drop this clamp off. I lost a few drops. I put it over onto the hot liquor kettle. Tighten it up here. Move my pump. Open the bottom. And you can hear all the air escaping. So now this is all set up. This is all set up to replenish the water in the mash tun. Now I'm going to take the hose that's draining into the bottom of my boil kettle, move the boil kettle a little bit closer. The gasket on. Tighten it up here. Open the bottom valve. Open the top, and the wort is now starting to flow over into the 3-in-1 boil kettle, chiller, and fermenter. Just push all the air out of the line, slow it back down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to watch it. I'm going to leave the bottom valve open, I'm going to turn the pump back on, and I'm just going to recharge the water at the top of the mash tun as I need it. I can throttle it here with the top valve, so I can just keep the exact amount of water in the top here as I need it. So pretty straightforward. I'm going to keep transferring over here to slow rate. I'm going to move all of the wort over into the boil kettle. I'm going to put all my sparge water over there, and then once it's drained out, then I'm going to start boiling.